Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the State Board of Education to order. It's 10:01 a.m. I would remind everyone, if you have a cell phone, to please silence it at this point. I've asked Ms. Rye to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and Ms. Altman to do our invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Join me in prayer, please. Our Father, we come today with such grateful hearts for the many blessings that we enjoy every day. We thank you for the privilege that we have of serving our fellow man, and we pray that the decisions that we make here today will be beneficial to those people around the state who've dedicated their lives to teaching our children and to improving their schools and their communities. We ask your blessings on those who need our prayers today. We particularly pray for our country and those people who are making decisions that impact us. We also pray for those who are around the world protecting us and taking care of people in other countries. We just pray for their safety and their safe return home. We ask that you go with us now as we deliberate the issues before us, that we will make sound decisions, that we will always be mindful of our responsibility, and we pray that we'll always stay in the center of your will. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Right. You have the notes in front of you, including the minutes from the August 16th board meeting and the minutes of the August 23rd special call meeting. I need a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes approved. Now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? And if so, I'll entertain the motion to do so now.
Chairman, I have several, if you'd bear with me here. The first one, I would like for us to, on action item number 2, I would like for us to pull that item and consider the giving our okay in the accountability results at the October meeting. There are so many issues and so many concerns from the folks that are out in the districts and all about the accountability assignments, etc. And the other thing is, we sit here as a board today and we don't have, the districts have the data, the press has the data. Now, does anybody on the board have the data? I don't have the data. We've not seen it till today. And we're going to be asked now to take that data and those assignments and vote on them in just a few minutes. And I just don't think that's the way it ought to work. I wonder why, and I'm also going to address another issue. The accreditation commission had raised an issue about getting information late. And one of the things that was shared very honestly was that one thing is they don't want you to get the information too early because you might talk to your local district and that kind of thing. Well, my whole thing is, we're on here for a reason. Is it a lack of trust that we don't get the data in time to make good basic decisions based on the data and that kind of thing? So I have some serious reservations. And what I would propose that we might look at is, let's take some time and try to look at the accountability model in whole, in context, because what we continue to do is cut scores, and we're doing Band-Aid approaches. And if you look, now I'm going to jump to another agenda item. We had a special call meeting and we voted to put out for APA, and we got APA information. Monday night, I got a 71-page email with information based on the APA and that issue about changing the cut scores for the high schools. Yesterday, on top of that 71 pages, now it's 115 pages. But there were 55 people out in the public who responded. And as of the email yesterday, 29 opposed the move, 19 approved of what we were trying to do, of the change, and there were 7 that were supposedly, that just weren't germane to the topic. So there are a lot of concerns and issues, and there are other issues that were brought to our attention, like yesterday. And I just think that if we really want to look at it, let's take the accountability model and get some bright, smart people and sit down and look at this and not just come in here, look at data and rubber stamp and pass that. So that's my motion on item number 2. Item 3B, I'm sorry.
The motion is for the action of pulling item number 2 to consider going before the board with that item in October. That is the motion.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so I want to add item 3B.
You probably need to do them individually.
Let's stop and do them individually. So as Raina just said, the motion is to move discussion item number 2, approval of 2017-18 statewide accountability results, from a vote this month essentially to a vote next month. So that's the motion. Needs a second. Okay, there's a second. Okay, any further discussion before we vote?
May I ask a
yes.
question? What impact will this have on school districts in terms of grades and what have you? I mean, what is the ramification of that?
The only thing I can say about that is for every single year that I've been here, districts have asked for us to move this up as soon as we possibly can. I think one year, I think it came to you in November. I think it's come to you in October. And so we made a commitment. In fact, I talked with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee about this. And I said, if we could get this to you in September, knowing that it would possibly shorten your windows, and they said, great. We'll take it on our end if you can get it to us as early as you possibly can. So we made every effort on our end to make sure that the districts had it in September this year, which is the earliest they've ever received it. So I can tell you the feedback we've been getting. Oh, and one other comment, we get the same request from across the street, have every single year, what are we going to do to get the results out to the districts as soon as possible?
My question was the very same one that Ms. Altman asked. I have one from Mr. Franklin, though. Your rationale is to be able to thoroughly, if you would, read the materials, digest it, and discern it. That's the rationale for wanting to do this. Okay. What's the second rationale?
The other is, if you look at that email that we got with the public comments and all, are we going to disregard those public comments? And now again, we're talking about over here, but here's what we're being asked to vote on: accreditation ratings that are based upon cut scores that we preliminarily set and have not finalized. We're not going to do that until the very last item of today's agenda.
But we're going to, I would propose that item go to item number 2. And I was prepared to make that motion because a lot of us recognize that needs to be up front. So I was prepared to offer that motion, but we have to dismiss with this one first.
I tend to agree with Mr. Franklin as far as the public, educational public, I should say. There's a lot of concern out there concerning cut scores. There's a lot of concern out there that what we discussed on our teleconference meeting of a target that they were shooting for, and then all of a sudden it was pulled from beneath them. It may be good if this board would consider delaying it for a while so that we can get the concerns from all of the public, and then we can address it, because it is a lot of concerns out there, and it's very frustrating to a lot of them. I have had all kind of calls, and most of them is dealing with these.
And the reason I was thinking is that I'm going to agree with Dr. Kelly here, but I also agree with Dr. Franklin. I mean, with Mr. Franklin, is that I just believe there needs to be further discussion with it, and if that's when we move it later so that we can discuss it. But I know that I too have received lots of it, and there's information as a new person that I would like to be able to look at more of and understand more, so that I feel like that I can make a decision with good information in front of me.
The only other thing I want to make sure we understand again clearly, we're wanting an additional, it's actually 3 weeks because we have a shortened span to be able to consider this and vote on this then. If, however, in that process, we start addressing changes to the accountability model, then that fundamentally changes the calendar further to the right because of the APA requirements. So I just want to make, here if that's a concern, and that certainly is something that, we can discuss. But if it's just voting on this again, then that's 3 weeks. We'll vote on October. If there's other concerns to the accountability model that change, that's going to shift to the right. Yes, sir.
I would think that most of the folks out in the field would rather get data that's based on sounder or have their concerns addressed and wait a little while than they had. Let's rush on in here today, get this stuff, and 10 minutes later we vote on it and out the door we go, than they would us do that. I can't answer for them. I'm just telling you that as a former practitioner, what are we rushing to? You said that your advisory groups have said, and I understand that, but there's nothing legal or there's no other reason for us to rush through this, is it? Dr. Wright?
That's up to you. I'm just telling you, I had my superintendent's advisory committee yesterday, and this wasn't even a topic. They didn't even bring this up at all. The only thing they wanted to discuss, which was legitimate, was the new EL component, because that's brand new because of federal law. But the whole idea of the reset never even came up by any of the group that I had yesterday.
I'm not against the delay at all, but I do think there's a couple of things to consider. One is let's just say we voted in that process at that time to do away with percentiles and went to whatever else that would be. That would be a total different distribution or validation or vetting, and what would that look? I think that's to Dr. Dean's point, that is a considerable process, I would say. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't need to be done. I don't know whether it's done it's doable in that time frame. Certainly we can discuss that, choose not to do that, go with what we got right now, and make those changes to the accountability model in the future. So a couple of considerations. We
have a board retreat in October, and to me that would be an appropriate time that all the concerns that you have and everybody's concerns get put on the table, and if we decide to make changes to it or tweak it or whatever, then that gives us the window to do that and do all the APA and hear the districts and what have you. So, I mean, we do have that coming up that would give us the opportunity to really get into the weeds on this thing. So.
Point of clarification, a question. Is the retreat before our board meeting in October?
Yes.
The work session here, it was originally around the strategic objectives review, but I think we've kind of come to the conclusion it should be focused on the accountability model, an understanding of it, a prediction of future issues.
The other question I would have, if we opt to not take this as an action item today, would we move it as an item for information? Would there be discussion today and no action? What are you proposing?
I would prefer to have the discussion and the presentation to be a part of the information that we go. Just like when we met last month, I applaud the willingness to put off a week and give the accreditation commission a second glance, give us a chance to really go back, because the information that was given to us that meeting, I went home and went through that. It was great information, but like I say, I hadn't even looked at it. It's in here, but I was given that. I saw that when I came in here at 9 o'clock today, and I'm going to be asked to vote. If we follow the agenda, I'd be asked to vote on an issue that affects people across this state, communities, and that kind of thing. And I just don't think that's good practice.
If, providing that we do have a discussion today, I can support the delay.
I think that's fair.
Let me just
fair to everybody.
Restate, where we are. So the original agenda would have us vote on the scores today. The motion is to vote on the scores in October, but use our time today to have a discussion. And then the work retreat that we planned, which I think October 10th, it's the Wednesday before our meeting, at that point, we will spend most of our time kind of reviewing the accountability model. If changes are required immediately, then that's going to impact other things for the next day. It gets kind of squirrely, but we will have a further discussion about the accountability model to understand how to further perfect this as we move along. So I think that's the motion that needs a second. Ms. Rye gave us a second. Any other further discussions? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion carries. So we'll just continue on and ask, did you have additional, well, I know Dr. Kelly wanted to rearrange that, but I think it's sort of, is that still relevant to move that now?
I don't think it's
I don't
relevant
think it is
now.
either. Yeah. Okay.
It's no action, so
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't think it matters.
Any other changes to the agenda?
Question, would it be voted on within the consent agenda? Aye. Would I still be voted on within the consent agenda, or did it need to be removed?
Move.
The agenda.
To be removed.
Move.
It's still on the agenda,
Removed
so you have
till
to
next.
remove
It's in the wrong place anyway.
That's right.
It will be removed. So I think we probably should get a motion.
Get a motion to remove I and.
So moved.
Second.
So the motion is to remove I, that's the cut scores, and we'll address that in October. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries. Any other changes or additions, deletions to the, Mr. Franklin?
I would like to add on the agenda, under 3B, contract, I would like to have a discussion of the SPED minus contract.
That's an executive session.
Why executive session? The information's in the Clarendon Ledger. It's been,
The details.
you
that-
meant,
Go ahead, I'm
you
sorry.
mentioned it to the legislative budget group. There have been discussions. Have any of you had discussions? Have you discussed that with other board members or anything, or legislators, Dr. Wright?
I mentioned I told them exactly why the contract was canceled at my elbow presentation. I can certainly tell you the exact same thing, but there are other details that are involved in this contract that we need to discuss in executive session.
Based on information that we've been received, as well as some actions that took place yesterday, I'm advising that it's brought up in executive session under 2541-7, 4A and K, 4B, and 4D, but based specifically on potential litigation.
There is a motion to, unless you withdraw the motion, there's a motion to have a discussion. Yes, sir.
I don't understand you to say that there are potential litigation
That is
on this particular contract.
the statutory authority of which I'm advising you to discuss it in executive session.
What about personnel? Just the litigation is just on. Okay.
You're talking about the contract? And there may be something touched on personnel, which is why I listed every subsection in the statute.
I had a brief conversation with Mr. Franklin about this yesterday, and of course I had a tendency to agree with him as far as being able to discuss all contracts the same as we have on the agenda for the day. But if there's a litigation pending, then that's horses are different.
That motion has really died for lack of a second. You really have.
Here's a deep concern, and when Dr. Wright was kind enough to share with us in an email on the 31st, then I sent back an email, and this is where my concern really builds. I asked, does she have the legal authority to violate or do away with a contract that this board voted on almost a year ago now? We voted on it, and then she is opted to get out of that. Now, my thing is this. I'm poor. I don't need a legal situation to come up, and it comes back on this board, and we're held responsible if that's the case. I don't want to see me or anybody else be responsible for a contract that was voided, and we turned around and get sued, and then it comes back on this board when we had nothing to do with the cancellation.
I understand your concerns, and again, because, and specifically from what you've just said, if you want to discuss any personnel positions or authorities or
I didn't
responsibilities,
mention personnel,
as
I
well
just said
as
the contract. I understand the personnel
as,
thing.
right, as well as the potential litigation, I strongly advise this be discussed in executive session.
Is there a second to the motion? Here none, we'll move forward. Any other additions?
I'll second it. Did it die for lack of second?
Well, there wasn't, so we moved on, but if you seconded, I think.
I'll second it
Okay.
in order to get a vote on it.
So the motion is to add 3B to the, what item is that? Action item, approval of action items, 3B to
I
add.
think we have, pardon me for interrupting, but I think we have to rely on our legal counsel on this. I mean, that's why we have attorneys. She works for the Attorney General. She has a hotline to the Attorney General. And I think we have to rely on our legal counsel on this. And if it says, she says it needs to be discussed in executive session, that's what we need to do.
Motion and a second, I think that, we have to vote. So
Yes,
I
we
think,
do.
does anybody have any other additional discussions on the matter? Okay, hearing none, then let's move for a vote to add 3B for discussion of the contract to the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Not carry. Okay, other additions, changes?
Mr. Chairman, point of order. If we're going to have those kind of discussion, there should be a suspension of the rules before we vote. If we're going to have that kind of delayed discussion, there was no second to the motion. All we had to do was suspend the rule, have the discussion, and then the second would have been in order. But just a point of clarification.
Yes, sir. I'd like to add action item number 5 is a presentation of the ACT data that was removed from our agenda last month. I'd like to have that presentation and data today.
By ACT.
You'll remove the motion.
Can we expect to see that on the October agenda?
Depends on when we get it from ACT. If we get it before, I think it's the tail end of October is what they told us. So you could have it in November.
So are you removing the motion?
I will, yeah.
Okay. Any other additions, changes, deletions?
Action item number 6. I want us to
Wait, where are you now?
I'm asking that we add action item number 6, and that is that we do not place items on the board agenda unless backup information is provided at the same time that we get our packet.
So that,
Whereas I got this packet last Thursday. And then
that's our
like today-
mail out. That's our mail
Yes,
out.
ma'am. I'm saying anything that doesn't come to us in that mail out that we don't add,
So what we have no control over is when APA ends. And so we cannot send you APA feedback until the close of business the day of APA ends. And that's one of the reasons that you received all the notices from APA Monday night, because APA Monday. So to put a rule in place that we have no control over, I don't know how we do that, because sometimes APA ends before the mail out. Sometimes it ends after the mail out. So we have no control over when APA ends.
we could have control over the data that we're going to look at, we're going to talk about today on the accreditation assignments.
We didn't
Because
release.
you released that to the press and every district in here. I got calls and they said, well, y'all are doing this, that, and the other. I said, I have no clue.
That's not a problem, Mr. Franklin. We can deliver that to you the same day we deliver it embargoed to the press and to the districts. That's not a problem. That's fine. That's fine. We could have done that this year if I'd known you wanted that done.
Any other additions? Paula, you have something? there any other things that can be discussed during that time without getting into the minutia of the data?
I think item I is the priority. I mean, the consent agenda I is the priority because if the board chooses not to implement the current policy that we have for standard settings for
Paula, sit up so everybody can hear you, please. Thank you.
Consent agenda I is the priority because we have the temporary rule that was effective immediately to reestablish the high school cuts based on the current state board policy with the percentiles that have been established. If the board chooses an alternate measure, of course that would be arbitrarily and not based on an arbitrary assignment of grades for high school and not based on current state board policy. If you choose, based on the public comments, who many disagree with the option or the methodology used to establish the cuts, being the percentiles, that would force us to begin the standard setting process again, which is a multi-month process, which would, in my opinion, likely delay the accountability results being approved until the spring. But that's the board's pleasure if you do so. But my point is it's inappropriate to have discussions about the data that's been prepared for you for item 2 and approved by the commission for the accountability results, because that's solely based on the temporary rule for the high school cuts that were established last year.
Second thing is, we were discussing, the issue on the table is that we get data, anything on that agenda, we get it in our packet ahead of time rather than like this is. Now, that's what we were discussing, and that's what we had the thing to do. Now, the other thing is, you're talking about, why would you release that data to everybody else? Now, who put the agenda item at I and 2? The board didn't have anything to do with that. I agree with you that I should be discussed before 2, but we didn't.
Well, I was approved last month as a temporary rule to be effective immediately. And so the AP, when the rule became effective immediately last month, it's just a requirement to follow through with the APA process. So, but what APA is asking us to do is to not use the percentiles. That's currently the approved methodology for establishing the baseline for cuts at the district, the high school, and the elementary level.
I is a moot issue now. That's gone. But
no, I is the priority. No. I is the priority issue.
No. You voted last month to approve the temporary rule effective immediately, which meant that day, and we used that rule to calculate all of the accountability grades. So when it comes back through APA, it goes back onto consent for the final approval. But all of the calculations have been done based on what you approved last month, A, B, how this was applied to the policy that you approved last spring, because we applied your policy and then the temporary rule when we calculated all of the grades. So it's not a moot point. It is a very vital point, because if you change that, to Dr. Vanderford's point, that changes every single thing in item 2, and the whole standard setting process has to start all over again. And as she just said, that would take months to get that accomplished, and these grades would not be coming back to you until probably spring. So I is a critical issue that needs to be decided on today before we even go into 2.
I thought that when we were discussing the issue of 2 and we were going to put off until next month, that we said I was.
She's saying she's correcting. She can't. That's why she's interrupting through this process to say you got to vote on I, but we can't discuss the grades because they're embargoed. So we got to vote on I, okay, which we'll do. That's an amendment to the agenda that someone needs to make, and then we'll vote on I, but not have a discussion on the grades because of the embargo nature of until next October.
So can
we need to go back to Dr. Kelly. If I remember right, Dr. Kelly, you made a motion that we move I up, didn't you?
No, I did not. I was prepared to do that, but in light of the new information, I'm comfortable with the change.
So one other thing I need to note, item 4, is going to be a demonstration of the new Mississippi State report cards, which are report cards for every district and every school in the state. This goes live today, populated with the data from item number 2. And so that we're going to demonstrate that to you today because that's now on our website. It's required by ESSA, and so we have already populated all of the data for all of the report cards for the districts and the schools, and that goes live today.
Do we need to remove that? Because it's using data that we theoretically would have approved today?
That absolutely,
So-
because that's why we move forward based on the temporary rule last month to run the data based on what you had approved last month. So if you're not going to approve that methodology and you're going to change the policy, then that throws it into a totally different place than we are right now.
I don't know that it's been determined that we're going to change the policy. It was just a discussion about that. That was really the caution up front to my comment that says if that was to take place, then there's many delays in the process of it. So there is the possibility that this is we go through this, we look at it. It is chosen not to change it, which doesn't invade that, but I still need to be dealt with in relationship to that.
All right, let me just put this on, get this all clear. Let's vote on this and we move on. It's 10:30. We haven't even started our meeting yet. We're still working on the agenda. So we're going to move I forward and vote on I. There's not going to be a discussion on 2 because of the embargo nature, and we're going to remove 4 because it's affected by the grades. Those are the 3 changes to the agendas. Yes.
Go back to my motion.
Yes. Were you going to say something?
But if you approve I, reaffirm the temporary rule that was approved last month, then the data
final submission
that is in number 2 is accurate and has been calculated based on that reset of the baseline. And you could certainly have all the time that you needed to review the data behind tab 2, but it's not going to change. It's calculated based on the business rules and the points that the districts have, the points that the 1,000-point schools have, and the points that the 7. It's not going to change.
Yeah, we're embargoing it for an additional 3 weeks, Johnny.
My question is, how did we get away from just, all I asked was a motion to consider that we have the data or any information, the backup material, before we consider an item on the agenda. That's what we started off with. And you come in with all the stuff. 2 had been decided. So as a point of order, what are we doing discussing 2 again?
It's related to the APA that we have to affirm the I. She's making that point. We're coming back to your number 6 addition, action item number 6.
They had told us when we discussed 2. He had made that point already, But what we're coming back to is a push for us to go on and do 2. And
No.
I just want us to,
there's no
let's
push
stick to what
involved.
we're doing,
I just clarified that. I just clarified that. But there is no discussion on 2. The board has already approved an agenda item to move that discussion till October. That is gone, and there is no discussion on 2. She's not, in my opinion, asking us to consider that. Which we
saying
originally
I couldn't
said,
discuss
let me
2.
finish. Which was originally said, well, that's not necessary since we're doing that. You've come back and said, actually, do the APA, you do. So we need to vote on I. Okay, we need to remove 4 because it's impacted in the embargoed scores. And then we'll come back to your add 6 because of the information, the original motion that you made. We'll get a second for that, and we'll vote on that. So let's put aside your point on I because Johnny had the floor, Mr. Franklin had the floor with adding 6, which was don't put anything on the agenda unless the backup material is ready. That's his motion as an agenda item to be added under action. Approval of action items would be number 6, and I just restated the motion.
We also put some kind of caveat in there that if it APA ends after mail out, then you'll have to get the APA after the mail out because we have no control over APA and no control over the number of days. So we can assure you, not a problem, any item that's on the agenda, because I've already said to the team, if you don't show up at board prep with all the things done, it gets taken off the agenda. I've already told everybody that. So I can guarantee you that. What I cannot guarantee you is that you will not automatically get everything from APA the day the mail out is done because the mail out may be after, or APA may end after the mail out.
Let me fix it if I amended the motion to say except in situations to where APA is involved.
Well,
Or any other time since.
let me ask a question about that, because I recall there have been times when you're waiting on some clarification from federal people
That's
or
true, too.
whatever that you may not get till Friday afternoon or Monday. I mean, I'm not sure we can cover every scenario, but
All time sensitive.
there's a lot of time-sensitive material that we do. So I mean, I don't know, but I'm just,
They with the exception to time-sensitive
well,
material.
maybe so.
Stay with that exception, if that's your pleasure. Or you can take it in consideration when you vote.
But you can't fuss now when you get something on Wednesday afternoon. You can fuss, but we're not gonna pay any attention to it.
I hear you.
I'm gonna
I
restate.
can't imagine you not paying attention to me, Mr.
I'm gonna restate the motion, and it still needs a second. So it's no information will be shared with State Board of Ed members without backup material unless impacted by APA or otherwise accepted through time-sensitive information.
Accountability revisions for attendance. That's underway. There's things going on, and she said that she could update us.
There's a task force that's currently working on all, but we don't have an update to give you today.
You're giving me the update now.
Yes, sir. The meeting that was originally planned to occur this week did not occur. That has been rescheduled for October the 4th, so that task force will meet on October the 4th.
You remove the motion based on that? Okay. Any other further? All right, so just one other order of business here. We need to add I back to the agenda and then vote it back on the agenda, and we'll vote on it in order. And I just would say, let's make a motion to put it where item number 2 is. So if y'all understand that wherever I is in the agenda, let's move it to 2 so we can vote on the cut scores and be able to move forward with our discussions on the grades. So simple, add I back to where 2 is the motion that's required.
So moved.
Okay.
Any further discussion here? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Ayes on there. And lastly, based on what Dr. Wright said regarding the Mississippi Succeeds report card, we need to remove 4 from the discussion of board items because we're waiting to discuss grades in October.
So move.
Second.
Any other further discussion? Here none. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any other further agenda items? All right.
One more.
Now, come on, man.
Adjourned.
It's lunchtime.
Have lunch.
It's lunch.
At least feed.
Okay. No, it's
Be careful how you say that.
This is making-
You get seconds on that.
yeah. All right. Just give a quick second here. I am now. We'll call on the report from the state superintendent.
All right. You have a folder in front of you that I want to draw your attention to. There's 2 documents that you have in it. One is a report, and the reason I'm bringing this to you because it was brought to my attention. It's called Leadership Matters. And interestingly enough, if you look at it and you think, well, you start opening the pages, you say, well, this has everything to do with Alabama and nothing to do with Mississippi until you get into the report. And so it's called Leadership Matters, a blueprint for reinventing schools for student success. What I've done starting on the 3rd page is copied for you what they included. You can see who wrote it. It was their business alliance, etc. You'll see who was involved in the council and who was involved in the project. And what I've given you that are their current pages, 11, 12, and 13, 14, and the top of 15, it's all about Mississippi and the success we've had. So they used us as the example of one of the states in the southern region that has demonstrated success. And so I thought you would appreciate seeing this from another state that we've been used as an example of a state that is succeeding. So I'll give you a chance to read that. The other thing that you see in front of you, we have revised this document. We got a lot of really positive feedback on this document. It's called What Every Instructional Leader Needs to Know. And if you will look through this, we distribute this to all of our schools, and it is a way for them to know exactly who to contact inside the agency, what each office is responsible for doing. It provides email addresses for the department. It provides phone numbers for the department. So we've had a lot of positive feedback from our administrators across the state, because this is a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about MDE and how to get in touch with us. So I thought you would appreciate seeing a copy of that. I did, speaking of accountability, I met with the Vicksburg business leaders to discuss the accountability model. They wanted a better understanding of the model, so I met with them. I also met with our new state auditor, Shad White. He and I had about an hour conversation, a delightful person. He is a huge public education advocate and very much an early childhood advocate. So it was nice to have him in a one-on-one as well. I had my first Teachers Advisory Council meeting recently, and that's always a delight. Probably had 50 people-ish. I've got 2 more scheduled. There are over 200 teachers on my Teacher Advisory Council now. So I meet with them throughout the year. I create part of the agenda, they create part of the agenda, and it's a really good discussion. Every time I meet with them, it's a delight. The Charter Authorizer Board, I personally termed off, but the state department, the state agency has a rep. So I appointed Quentin Ransberg to be my representative. So he is going to be representing MDE on the Charter Authorizer Board. And this past week, I spoke to the National Governors Association Education Policy Advisors Institute. So I was asked to come and talk about Mississippi and the success that Mississippi has had. And that is to every state that has an education policy advisor, like Mr. Ross back there, came to this meeting to hear what we were having to say and what others were having to say about improving high schools, improving CTE programming, et cetera. And I thank them for their invitation. And then just yesterday, I met with my Superintendent's Advisory Council. That was a really good discussion, lots of nuances around different aspects of the accountability model, also talking about the new designations that are coming out that the districts will have per our ESSA law around those schools that are going to get targeted support versus comprehensive support versus additional targeted support. And this is all brand new, a little complicated to understand, but as always, a great meeting with a great group of people. For my own recognition, I want to ask anybody that's touching the Office of Assessment and Accountability and anybody from OTSS that had anything to do with accountability or the assessments, I'd like you to stand. We're missing lots of people here. So OTSS, I think, left when they knew that the Mississippi Succeeds report card wasn't going to be on. I just want to thank you, and Paula, please know, and John Cramen, please express my deepest appreciation for the hours and hours that your teams have spent, not only during the day, but at nights and on weekends, in order to get these data prepared for you in a timely manner and to get the data prepared on the expedited schedule that we were on to get it out to the district. So I want to say thank you to all the folks at MDE that really had a lot of responsibility about that. And now I want to turn to Spotlight. So today, great Spotlight. We are spotlighting Mississippi's Move to Learn campaign, and this is where classroom teachers promote physical fitness while improving academic performance. And the Bauer Foundation funds on Move to Learn was launched in 2012. It incorporates movement in the classroom through short exercise videos and healthy lesson plans, and all of these resources are free, they're easy to use, and they are available on the Move to Learn website. Studies have shown that physical activity increases students' ability to learn and correlates with fewer absences, which we all know around chronic absenteeism makes a big difference. I'm looking at Toni Kirsch back there. She's nodding. And fewer disciplinary incidents at school. But what's more, it's even fun. And you're in for a treat today. You'll see that not only the students enjoy this, but the teachers get a really big kick out of this too. So before we start, I want to recognize our guests. We have Ann Travis, who is the CEO from the Bauer Foundation, and they're the ones that are paying for this. You have Larry Calhoun, who is the Move to Learn coach. I told him he's the hero. He's the one who walks in the room and all the kids go crazy. Absolutely. Dale Dykeman, who is the physical education specialist, and Scott Clements, our director of the Office of Healthy Schools and Child Nutrition. So thank you all for being here, and without further ado, Move to Learn.
With 7 and 8-year-olds, and it's an unrealistic expectation to ask them to sit still for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and learn.
When I look at my kids and I'm like, whew, 80% of you are no longer listening to me. It is time for us to do something completely different. If I ever notice my kids are dragging, put on one of those, and immediately they're all engaged.
So Move to Learn is a free online resource that the Bauer Foundation and the Department of Education co-created collaboratively starting in 2012.
If you use those videos, which are only 5 minutes in length, it allows those children to get up and dissipate any pent-up energy. And when they sit back down, some remarkable things happen. They're able to focus, they can concentrate, they can stay on task, and teachers tend to have fewer disciplinary problems after watching the video.
And as a teacher, one of the best resources I have found is being able to go onto that website and search for a subject or a skill that I'm working on that day, and having those resources right at my hands, so I'm not having to recreate the wheel. I'm not having to make stuff up. It's right there ready for me to use. It says, hey, you're teaching punctuation. Use these movements. It's going to help the kids. You want them getting up and doing some shapes? Have this video. There's just so many resources.
Some of our research that we've done most recently with the University of Southern Mississippi is so exciting because it shows that students who get to do Move to Learn are actually attentive. Over a 5-minute period, they were more attentive, almost double the attentiveness of time on task for the children who got to do Move to Learn compared to those who didn't get to do Move to Learn. That was real exciting for us to see that it really does help kids to focus and be better learners in the classroom.
The 5 minutes are done on purpose. 5 minutes is not a lot of time to take out from the academic. In fact, it adds to. And what a 5-minute brain break does is it allows the child to just re-energize and get oxygenated blood to the brain, and now they can focus and concentrate and have a little fun at the same time.
And even something we like to do too, we'll have just like a 10-second break where I'll just be like, everybody stand up real quick, do your favorite move from Move to Learn. You know, and that way you're still incorporating it and what they know about it, and you're not taking away from any time either. So they enjoy just any kind of movement.
Now give me a low five. Another high five. Now shake it off.
Woo! Oh, it's very easy. I mean, if you just pull the tab up on your computer, I can have a plan time for it, or I can sometimes be like, you know what, we just need a break. Walk over there, press play, bam, it's up. If a teacher has not used Move to Learn, they need to try it. I mean, if they try it one time, they're going to see student engagement.
We see it is so fun. We see many teachers participate with their children to do Move to Learn. We've had some of them call and let us know. They send us emails and let us know they just love it. They love doing it with their children, that it makes them feel better too, to kind of get some of their wiggles out and get some of their energy out, and it gets them focused on what does their next lesson need to be that they need to teach. Yeah, so it's really fun to see the energy of both the teachers and the students around the videos. Currently, Move to Learn is really focused on pre-K through 6th grade. This year, one of the things that's really exciting that we're going to launch in 2019 is a set of Move to Learn videos that we're doing for high school students, because there are high school students in Mississippi who did Move to Learn in elementary school, and they've been asking us, can we have a Move to Learn for high school students? And so we're working on the production of that this year, and we're really excited about that.
I want to say thanks to Ann, who's been such a great partner and a great supporter with MDE, and Coach I'm going to tell the story. So the first time that I met him, I was doing a presentation. Little did I know that he was also going to be there. And so right as I'm getting ready to get off stage, it's like, oh, no, 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 no. We're going to do the move to learn. So you think 5 minutes sounds like a short period of time until you're up there doing that? And I mean to tell you, when 5 minutes ended, I was winded. So I just want to say thank you, because I know you've made a huge impact across our state, and obviously your contributions mean so much to us. So thank you both very much.
Did y'all come back about 2 o'clock and get us? Yeah. I was looking at that saying we might need some of that. Wow.
Might mention the video was Clinton Public Schools.
Just at 2.
Yeah.
Oh, look, he's gotten me before, trust me.
I like it.
Harry is big on singling you out.
Yes, he is.
You and Dr. Wright can do all this.
Oh,
yeah,
too.
oh no, Lord, no. That
I'll
concludes my
2.5
report,
each.
Okay. Only thing I'd say is report of the chair. I had the opportunity of Monday of this week, to attend the legislative budget office's hearings. We were honored to be one of the few agencies selected to come and discuss our FY20 budget recommendations. Obviously, Dr. Wright did the heavy lifting, but it was a pretty neat opportunity to get in and hear sort of how the money that has been invested in education so far has been being used, and what our priorities are in moving forward, and sort of the questions that were coming from the, I guess, 14 members of the legislature. That's all I have as the chair. I know that we had a subcommittee meeting this morning. Was that Dr. Kelly, your committee?
Yes, our committee did meet. The Accountability Committee met this morning. There was a lot of conversation around the report that was to come to this board today. You'll hear some of that for information, and other parts of that, of course, we have delayed talking about today. The second thing that came to us, though, was you'll recall several months ago there was a proposal to have student representation on this board. This board voted, there was a consensus, not a vote, to move forward with that initiative. Dr. Wright appointed a subcommittee from the accountability staff to put that together. They've done a wonderful job of developing that initiative. We had a chance to hear it this morning and get feedback. They're going to tweak it a bit and have it for a board presentation to you come October. So you'll get a chance to see that in October. But we think you'll be very pleased with what they've come up with.
I don't think there are any other subcommittee meetings. Now we'll move into the discussion of the board items. The first up, Dr. Oakley, I'll ask you to come on up. Revise the Mississippi Kindergarten Guidelines. That's clear.
All right, good morning. In item 1, we are bringing forward for your approval the revised Mississippi Kindergarten Guidelines. We brought these forward earlier in the summer for revision to align with some additional work we had previously done on the pre-K guidelines this spring. You can see the amendments or the backup in your folders, in your binders. These guidelines are for the operation of kindergarten programs. They include information on enrollment requirements, curriculum materials, assessment, organizational procedures, staffing, facilities, etc. You can see minor edits to the document based on the public comments we received from educators across the state. Be glad to take any questions you may have at this time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. The question is, I could probably better do this, but when you put down a minimum of $1,000, when you look at some of the backup information you got, a lot of our teachers are being put in positions out there to supply their classrooms. And this is kindergarten. I don't know what it takes, but I'm saying that whatever it takes, I am convinced that if we get these kids started off right, we can solve a lot of our problems. We have an emphasis on this board and in this department on early childhood, and whatever it takes for those kindergarten teachers to have what they need to get those kids, how to do that, you know. And I'm not sure 1,000's enough. So I was going to ask, would you revise it to $2,500 a month? And I'm going to say something about it. We talked last year about, you know, districts passing along supply budgets to children and families. If you look at the budgets, K-12 in the state spends almost $5 billion, federal and local dollars, tax dollars. Now, when you look, in addition to that's the budget, and the local board superintendent has discretion on how much they allocate to supplies. And that's none of my business. But here's the deal. When you look, and teachers are telling you, like last month we had a lady from down on the coast had in the paper that she was giving up the profession when we were talking. Dr. Vanderford and her team were talking about, you know, the teacher shortages. She was giving it up, that she got tired of putting up all the supply money. I had an email from a lady this week said that in my district, we even have to buy the printer's ink for the printers at $95 a cartridge. And these folks are being put in a situation out there where they're having to take out of their pocket, and they're the lowest paid folks in the system. But I'm going to go back to where I started with the local budgets and all. Do you know how much we spend on athletics and activities out of that $5 billion? And in addition to having local money for supplies in the classroom, we have EEF dollars. And a lot of folks that's what they're having to depend on, is the EEF money. But if we can spend nearly $50 million on athletics and activities, we ask the teachers to provide the supply monies and keep the classrooms going and all, you know. So I want to make sure, whatever it takes, and again, she's a classroom teacher, a kindergarten. She could probably address that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Ms. Right. I just want those kindergarten folks to have what they need. And some of the comments was, you know, we're now moving into trying to utilize technology in those classrooms and all. And I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush. Some districts may allocate more of us. I want to make sure have the classroom materials and supplies that they need.
Comment on that. Excuse me, Sean. Comment on athletics, just to make sure I don't misunderstand, or maybe we don't portray that wrongly. Is that you said 50 million out of most of that? I can just speak for my district. That's not state funds. That is appropriated within the district based on you know, revenues that's been established in the district. Now, it may not be true of all of them, but I'm just saying from state money standpoint, and maybe we can get some information on how much of that actually is.
If you look at the document that the department provides, it's got in there the revenues and the expenditures. And I'm saying across the state in all the districts combined, if you look at the revenue from activities and athletics and the expenditures for it, the differences about what I said.
There'll be a point in there, but what I'm saying, that revenues is inclusive of activity funds, which are money raised within the schools themselves to support those things. That doesn't mean it can't be raised within the schools to support kindergarten at the same time, but just don't want to misrepresent that expenditure of $50 million of state funds is going to athletics.
Once activity funds are taken in, what do they become? Do they become state dollars?
No.
They're part of the local dollars.
Local dollars. Salaries are probably included in that 50 million.
State and federal. That's what's.
Question on the revised kindergarten standard.
Bottom line is, please, let's give those kindergarten teachers what they need. Because they have done a yeoman's job. If you look at where our kids are going on the MCAS, and where they come out 9 months later, thank God for kindergarten teachers.
One thing I was just going to say is I was just going to address you, referring to me. I think because of the way that it reads, it shall, we never see that money. Most school districts don't have it to provide to us because they're working on a limited budget. What we use for classroom funds is EEF. I can tell you right now, I have spent $353 already in my classroom. out of my pocket. And that's not uncommon for teachers to do. So that's, I was just going to kind of reflect on that.
All right, so thank you, Dr. Oakley.
All right, thank you.
Item I, I replaced it, so if I'll refer you to I in your agenda and into your package, and ask Dr. Brandt.
Consent agenda I was
closer to call.
Seeking final approval to revise the Mississippi Public School Accountability Standards 2018, specifically the business rules of the Mississippi statewide accountability system to reset the baseline scores for high schools or schools with grade 12 based on current state board policy, as well as to assign grades classifications to all schools. And as Mr. Franklin previously summarized on the bottom of page 2 of your backup material in the last paragraph, we received 55 public comments during the APA process, which closed at 5:00 p.m. on September the 17th, earlier this week. 19 of the comments were in support of the changes, and 29 comments opposed the changes. We had several comments, as we stated, that were off topic, that were related to EL accountability component of the model, or the new science assessment that will be a part of the model next year. So to help pare down the lengthy document, pages 3 through 18 are just an excerpt of the business rules as they are contained in the accountability document, and you'll have the red strike through items where the language has actually been changed and will be replaced in the accountability document. On page 19 and 20, that's a summary of the comments that were received in support of resetting the baseline. So what staff did with pages 19 through 28 of your backup material of the 115 pages was to try to summarize what those comments actually were. So page 19 through 8, again, is a summary of what is contained from pages 29 through 115. And so if you look at the comments that were opposed, beginning on page 21, and I'm sure you've read through those when you received your materials, but a lot of the comments are opposed to the methodology that we have for establishing the baseline, which uses the percentile ranks. Some of the comments are difficult from time to time to decipher, but you can see that MDE staff has provided a response in the right-hand column. Some of the comments that were opposed talked about the reset of the high school baseline having a negative impact. And we, in the comments out beside of that, we clarified that it was not a negative impact on the schools. So if you recall, when we had our discussions last month about the temporary rule, we looked at the current cuts that were established in the 16-17 school year based on the same methodology. And I'll just use the 90th percentile as an A as an example. Last year that cut was 787. When we provided you the preliminary results last month, we had to provide you what that 90th percentile would be equated to and a number based on the preliminary results. And we shared with you that that was subject to change, that the actual numbers where the 90th percentile cut would be determined at the final run of the system. So it was predicted based on preliminary data that that cut would be 748 at the 90th percentile. However, in the final cut, the 90th percentile was at 754. So as I shared with the subcommittee, at the A and B cut, or the 90th and the 63rd percentile, the cuts came back 6 points higher than what was predicted based on the preliminary results. And for the D and F cuts at the 38th and the 14th percentile, it was 4 points different. So, you know, some of the conversation, whether it was in writing or calls that we received, you know, were districts or schools that were disappointed that the cuts changed from the preliminary to the final, but we actually shared with the commission and the board and the districts that don't think that the cuts that you saw based on impact data were what was going to actually be the cuts, because it was subject to change. And so as a result of that, the new cuts have been established at 754 for the 90th percentile. The 63rd percentile would be 648, the 38th percentile at 584, and the 14th percentile at 510. So when you apply the temporary rule board policy to the high school percentile cuts, that's what the cuts would be, and the grades that have been assigned to high schools that was behind your data for tab 2 were based on that final run of those cuts.
May I ask, last year, did you say the cut was 787?
Yes, ma'am. So okay. Last year, the 90th percentile for 16-17 was 787, and it's lower this year. It went from 787 final points to 754, points. And then from 679 to 648, and from 612 to 584, and from 547 to 510. So some of the comments also said that our changing the distribution only favored schools that were higher performing, or only benefited schools that's higher performing. But that's not an accurate statement, because the cut last year for the 14th percentile was 547, and the final this year was 510. So the comments that are there that said we were going to be a B, but now we're a D, that's not accurate, because the cuts changed and lowered at all 4 percentile points. But what may be causing some of the confusion is they did increase somewhat or slightly from the preliminary run to the final run, but we have not had a conversation with a task force member, or the commission member, or a board member, or a school district that said, ignore those cuts that you saw on that screen that people were taking screenshots of last month when we asked for the temporary rule, because that is not an actual cut.
I want to comment on that, and then I have a question. I know why you projected the cut scores to give us an idea, but in the future, to the degree that that can be somehow, you know, not put out. I mean, I think we could have understood it without the numbers, because I can't tell you, and I talked to several others, some heart-wrenching calls of principals whose, you know, grades have significantly improved, and they thought that they were this, but they turned out to be that by a point based on a projected number. And I think there was some discussion about how you handle that, and it's just sad and unfortunate, because they made tremendous amount of progress and they're just 1 point away, and, you know, they're talking about the impact in their community, and it really breaks your heart. But at the same time, it probably could have been prevented if somehow, I don't know, you know, how you can talk about.
Had we not shared those cuts?
I think, I think we could have understood the issue of changing the scores without giving numerical projections, because at the end of the day, it wasn't going to be relevant. And I have a question separate from that, and I just want a succinct answer. This issue of the percentile continues to be misunderstood. I get calls, emails, letters, and I try and address them, and I think that I understand it, so I'm going to ask the question to make sure that I do. The 90th percentile, you take the high score, and you take 90th percent of that, and that's how we break down the cut scores, right? It's not a presupposed quota of a certain score. Okay, well, that's information's out there, and, you know, it's kind of, you know, so just succinctly address in layman's terms so that I can understand you know, when you talk about taking the 90th percentile of the top score, is that the accurate way to say that?
That's correct. We take the points. I'm in this high school distribution, for example. The high school that had the highest number of points, the maximum number was the maximum was 1,000. I don't know what the highest high school point was.
Let's just say it's
right.
900.
And so we rank the high schools 1 to 253, and at the 90th percentile, the cut is drawn, and that number is determined. And
90th percentile of the highest score of the 253.
That's right, not of the 1,000 points.
It's based on the actual performance of the population, and then we establish that baseline, and then we let the numbers be what they are in subsequent years. So you'll see in the elementary schools we have more than 10% of schools with an A this year. We would.
Well, and I want to again say we are planning on the 10th to kind of roll up our sleeves and get after this and understand it. And you know, I think I do understand it, but I call my own understanding into question when constantly barrage of misinformation, and you know, I question whether or not I understand it. So let's not get into the weeds of the accountability model. I think it's not a good use of our time, especially since we're spending 3 hours on the 10th to do that. But that's the sort of conversations I want to make sure that everyone on the board is clear, and I might be the only one that's getting those calls and questions, but you've clarified it for me. Did you have a question?
Well, just a manifestation of that is you're competing against each other. You know, you're trying to, if you draw the line at let's say top 10%, and you draw that at 50 high schools, it's really you. And what happened in the fluctuation? Somebody moved above the line and forced somebody below the line. So you've got to beat 50 of, you know, your number 51. And then you're out. But what you have to do to move into it is to be better than.
And you know, there was a public comment regarding that competitive nature, and we responded to that. There are some states that don't have grades assigned or summative ratings for schools and districts, and so there isn't that competition. But our model is an A through F system, which intrinsically requires that there be a distribution among the population between F and A. And so, that competitive process occurs in the baseline year when we establish those grade assignments, and it's fundamental to the model. Exactly
the kind of conversation I really want us to have, because, you know, there are very smart people on this board. I mean, honestly, President Cumberland excluded. I can just tell you, practitioners, the people who have ed policy experience, those that have taught, those that have run cities. I just want us to kind of think about this model and understand that there's laws and legislation and federal requirements that all get baked into the pie. But, you know, what product are we producing that accurately shows your progress without, you know, creating disruptive and, you know, quite frankly, sometimes probably not useful competition just because you're an A and you're B, and now everybody, you know, gets after you in your local community. And you've raised, in one example I was told, they raised their average 69 points, but they're still the same grade. To me, that just seems not what we're trying to do. I mean, we want to celebrate growth and progress, you know, so I think that's the discussions around the accountability model, and I'm the one that said let's keep the conversation short, but let's not go down that rabbit trail unless, you know, there's obviously other comments.
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I think, because I'm looking at this letter, I've flipped through this whole thing trying to find the right letter, but I think the other thing that we need to make very clear while we're discussing this is around this board, we don't have an arbitrary number of how many schools we want in the top 10%. I mean, there is a perception out there that we're trying to make sure we have, we'd love for every school to be in the top 10%. And so it's not an arbitrary number of, because I've got a letter right here that says you don't want too many or too few districts in the A through F categories. That is not the point at all.
And so as a point of
some people, pardon me for interrupting you, but you know, it's just like LSU kicking a field goal at the end of the ball game and beating Auburn, who had played their hearts out. Some people win.
And one of the you know, comments, I mean, to address what Dr. Dean and Ms. Altman just said, that like with the state board policy, that it always forces us to have no more than 10% of schools an A or an F. But if we were discussing the data as a result of item 2, we would see that out of our 149 districts that receive a grade, 12.1% are actually A's. We're not capping because we didn't reset the baseline for the districts. So we didn't cap the districts at 10%. We actually would, results that you have behind tab 2 shows that 12.1% of our districts would earn an A. When you look at the 700-point schools or the elementary and high schools, we have 650 of those that receive a grade. That's 24.2% that are actually an A. So we don't have that cap. So I just urge you, as you read through these comments, I mean, you really have to digest them and try to understand what some of the comments are saying, because it's not everything that's in the comments that are not accurate. Opposed with the percentage.
Just a point. I agree with that 100%. That you got some in elementary that have progressed and along the line. But what it essentially has done is that those other two have been able to move up, and every time we reset a cut score, then you got to go back to the 10%. So if you reset the cut scores for elementary right now, you're going to take those 20% and move them back to 10%. Am I correct? That's a bad business. That's what's happened to high schools every year. You're dragging them back either from B to C, C to D, or A to B. And that's what people can't stomach.
But there were comments that said that as a result of this reset, that high schools that had made progress and were a D last year and would have been a B this year if it were not reset. That's not an accurate statement, because the cut point for the B dropped tremendously, and so that was inaccurate. There's some inaccuracies in some of the APA comments.
Suffice it to say, the accountability model continues to be, I talk about it as like building an airplane while you're flying it. I mean, there's a lot of brilliant statisticians who have developed that, so I don't mean to take it, but things are happening as we're moving along that's hard to predict. And what we simply want to do as a board is manage expectations and provide the right accountability model for the right for our schools across the state that really projects and tells exactly where they are. And we can do that. I think that we can come up with what we know now and the recent changes with ESSA and what the laws of the state say and all the regulations when laid out on the table. What is it that we're trying to give our schools, and make sure that we're not moving it around as much as we are for good reason. It's not arbitrary, but just get ahead of that.
What we're doing, Doctor, we're translating a number to a face. When you translate a number to a face, you see it differently. Yeah. And that's what we're doing in the conversations with all these people, that we know what the numbers say. But when you translate that down to people and how they're having to battle those different things, that you get a different look.
Any other comments on the cut score? Okay, thank you, ma'am. We'll move on to number 3, approval of Mississippi Department of Education contracts. Dr. Gavin.
Good morning. We don't have any other contracts to be approved on the agenda. The only thing that we're bringing forth today is the Mississippi state retirees that exceed $20,000. It's the House bill report with those contracts. That's the only item we have on the contracts today.
Franklin.
And looking at, we talked about paying folks, in Knoxville County, and I think Dr. Gilbert is not necessarily going to earn both of those numbers, or is he?
I think those contracts are up to, right?
Up to 99, 750.
What I was going at is, saw a picture, and we read the article where Knoxville County is cutting
he will not reach that number.
Because we have a superintendent.
That was just a placeholder until we got the permanent superintendent in place.
Any other discussions? Okay.
It was a good article, by the way, in the morning's paper about Knoxville County. Very good article. What was going on? Tackling the issues.
I'd like to maybe a plan in place to address it.
I think you're right. Okay, consent agenda.
All right, so we'll move to the approval of action items now. Let's see. Under Office of Academic Officer, do I have a motion to approve item 1? I was going to do approve action items then, okay?
So move.
Second.
Discussion, hear none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and we're calling 2, consent item 1, which was moved to 2.
Aye. Aye.
Item aye. Okay. Let's see. Any discussion? Do I have a motion to approve consent item I? Second?
I'll second it.
Second, any discussion? No further discussion here, none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Action number 3, approval of Mississippi Department of Ed contracts from Dr. Gavin. Any discussion here? None. Need a motion to approve.
So move.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now, we're into
Consent agenda minus I.
consent agenda minus I, and then action, all consent items are action items except for F and G.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Any further discussion on consent items? Here none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks. I mean, number 6 had already been added, which was the regarding providing information that's impacted by APA, and then since it was included, yeah, it was voted.
Oh, did you did already?
Consent,
Okay,
so
sorry.
that was
Okay,
encapsulated
sorry,
in
sorry. Okay, got it.
Executive session, I'm told, might take a while.
How long was the executive session? We might get through it.
Let's roll to executive session. That's all. We'll be getting our executive session material in order here.
Oh.
Okay, we've back in session here and out of executive session. The report out is that the State Board of Education approved appointment of Education Bureau Director 2, Jerry Russ, to serve as Project Management Director for the Statewide Longitudinal Data System. And we also approved the appointment of Education Bureau Director 2, Allison Igett, to serve as Special Education Director of Mississippi Schools for. All right. I think we probably.
You voted to get out of executive session.
Yeah, we're gonna go to lunch and then come back here. That's what I'm saying.
What else we got to
Coming back
discuss?
for.
I think everything.
Oh, we don't have, I mean, that's all that was on the agenda.
And we're done.
The agenda, but we have to adjourn though.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go through the rest of this. All right. So we'll move on to report on any meetings attended. No reports. Approval of any attendance needed for meetings. None. Okay. Other business. The board will host a work session, discussion of the Board of Education strategic plan / accountability. We'll hold that here October 10th, 2018, from 2 to 5 p.m. in this building, this room. And then our next board meeting will be October 11th, 2018, in Jackson at Central High School at 10 a.m. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Email that you sent out said the project had personnel implications that I can discuss with you at the September board.
Well, let's eat. I'm tired of sitting here.
I second that.
So
All right. Okay. We're at the point of adjournment. So
I have a motion on the floor. It didn't have a second yet, but I have a motion to adjourn. To adjourn the meeting. I thought we were through.
Okay.
I'll withdraw it if we need to, but.
Are you all coming back for executive session?
That's what we're
Is that
trying
a
to
motion?
understand now. There's a motion to adjourn, and I need a second.
If we need an executive session again, then I will withdraw my motion, but I'm not.
I thought that's what
That's
we were
personnel.
doing.
Are you wanting?
Personnel issue that I
Okay,
thought
so yeah,
we
now we have
discussed
to
as
come back
part
to
of the
executive
contract.
session. So we'll adjourn for lunch for 30 minutes, and we'll reconvene at 1:25.
Let's see, this, and I gotta give this to Deborah, so this, all of this stuff.
25. We're back, and the okay, it's 1:25, and we're back, and the previous consideration to move into executive session has been withdrawn, so we can adjourn with the motion.
Let Charles
And
have it.
a second.
We don't want to change anything.
All in
Let
favor
Charles
signify
have
by
it.
saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries. We stand adjourned.